Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jacob Restituto. I'm a musician from Northport, New York, and we have a very special interview today. I'm really looking forward to this interview. We have Chris Gehringer here on the channel, the mastermind behind the mastering of all these massive hits that you've probably heard on the radio or anywhere else in these past couple of decades. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Chris. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the channel.
Thanks for having me. I'm Chris Gehringer, partner, senior engineer at Sterling Sound, Edgewater, New Jersey.
So you emphasize Edgewater. Are there several Sterling Sounds around the world?
So Sterling Sound has been one facility for the last 3 decades. And now we actually almost 4 decades. And now we are Edgewater, New Jersey and Nashville, Tennessee.
Ah, very cool. Okay.
Yeah, we have 4 rooms here in New Jersey, myself, Randy Merrill, Greg Calby, and Joe Laporta. And in Nashville, we have Ryan Smith and Ted Jensen.
Very cool. You know what? I gotta look back at my emails from like 10 years ago when I first started doing music. There was some sort of the studio name sounds so familiar, and I just maybe that's why I was maybe talking to somebody back then in but they were based in Nashville,
Yeah.
so that's why maybe that rings a bell.
Oh, no, we've only been in Nashville for
Oh, okay, then
three
it
years
must have been a
now.
similar name then.
Yeah. There's a couple big
Yeah,
studios in
yeah.
Nashville.
Very cool. So, starting off the conversation, I'd love to know your story. I mean, how long have you been in this? Actually, no, let's back it up even further. Well, let's talk about what mastering is for the people that aren't familiar with it. You know, how would you explain it? And then let's talk
Okay.
about how you got into the industry.
So mastering is the last creative step in the music making process. It mastering, when it originally started out, it was disc cutting. So we would actually cut the master disc for the album, and that was the origination of what mastering was. And it was basically disc transfer, and then it turned into EQing the disc and adjusting the levels between songs to make the disc play a little easier and sound better. And from there, after disc mastering kind of I mean, it's not really phased out, it's actually back again. Like, people are buying vinyl, but it turned into CD mastering, and now basically streaming
Yeah,
mastering.
interesting.
And it's all designed to keep, make an album run smoothly, like EQ wise, level wise, things like that. There was a period where when you were putting together an album, you would sequence it and make it seamless, and one song flow into another. Not too many people are making full albums like that anymore, but that's basically what it was. And it's basically done with EQ, limiting, compression, things like that.
Absolutely, that's a beautiful explanation of it. So, how did you get
Right.
into the industry? And can you explain how long you've been in the industry and your story?
Sure. So when I was a teenager, I was like just completely like into music. Like, listen, just I would come home from school and just listen to records, and go to record stores and buy records. And it had always been something I was passionate about. And I was going to go to college. I was going to go to college for film, and I decided that I really wanted to be in music. So I started doing live sound for some local bands just by chance. Like, I lied to somebody about that I knew how to do it. And they're like, "Oh, come do our show tonight." And I had kind of been reading about it and learning about it. And back then there was no internet, so you had to read books or magazines about it. So I kind of lied my way into it. I did it, and they hired me back. And then another band hired me, and another band hired me. And then I just kept, doing it. And then I decided to go to a 1 year audio engineering school, the Institute of Audio Research, now defunct, but it was in the Village in Manhattan. And I went there for a year. I didn't even graduate. And then I started working in studios. And from working in a recording studio, I got into a mastering studio. And I've been mastering for, I think, 35 years
Wow,
now.
very interesting. So I'm
Yeah, I've been in music for almost 40, but
I love
mastering
that, man.
for 35.
That it's
Yeah.
amazing. So that's part of the reason I love having these conversations is because I like showing that it's actually possible to make a career inside the music industry. Because everybody tells you that it's impossible, or that it's one in a million, but it is possible to make a career in, by your definition, a very successful career in the music industry.
Sure. I mean, a lot of people, like, if you set your goal as this one tiny target in life, your chances of hitting that target are so small. But if you look at the music business as a whole, like I wanted to be a producer and an artist, and I wound up being a mastering engineer and now owning, being a partner in a very successful studio. And, you know, if you wind it back 30 something years, that wasn't my goal. But because these opportunities came my way and I realized like, hey, I could do this and this is cool. I just kept trying new things and wound up in
Yeah,
mastering.
absolutely.
So
That's a great perspective. Keeping the open perspective, like being open to change and being open to opportunities as they present themselves, and you might find something that you love in that opportunity.
it's kind of like I'm not like a golfer, but I kind of like look at it as like if you're on the fairway, the hole is that way, so drive that way, and as you get closer, then you narrow it down. But if you just say I'm going to hit a hole in one from the tee, you're never going to do it. So like, like you have to experience a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in the business. There's management, there's A&R, there's live sound, there's clubs, there's so many things. And if you experience all of them, you may find that you're better at one than another.
I
So
completely relate to that. I would have never thought that YouTube would have been the picture for me, and then here I am on YouTube. So,
yeah,
absolutely.
go.
So, for being in the industry for as long as you have, uh, I'm super curious to see how you've obviously seen the music industry change, and you mentioned that like you mastering has changed, mastering and how you've like the process of what you mastered for has changed. Can you talk on that? Can you talk on just the change of what you've seen in the music industry? I mean, you even mentioned the fact of like people aren't making albums as much anymore. I just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so like I mean, records were the first format for music, and then cassettes became popular, and then digital came in, and there was CDs started, but then a lot of people don't know outside of CDs there was digital audio tape, and they started a digital cassette at one point, and formats kind of changed. There's something called mini disc, and through all of it, the goal of what mastering is never changed. It kind of stayed with it, but you approach each format a little differently. And like that's what we're going through right now. Like streaming audio is approached differently than CD mastering because the level's a little different, the way it actually changes, the way it's converted is a little different. So you have to adapt to that. And now there's Atmos, which is something that is like right now it's a little bit like the Wild West because there's no blueprint of what Atmos is. So everybody's kind of going into it like either with pause like I am or full on, whereas a lot of people are now is, mixing in Atmos. And
So I actually don't. Can you
you
talk
know,
on that for a sec? I've seen it obviously,
so
but I don't know anything about it yet.
Atmos is immersive audio. It's not just surround sound. Like surround sound comes in like a lot of people with their TVs have it set up at like 3.1. A really good surround sound system is
Yeah.
5.1, 5 speakers, and then a bass, a subwoofer. Um, Atmos, I think the proper Atmos setup is 19 by 2 by 6. So there's speakers all the way around you, two subwoofers, and speakers above you. So it gives you a multi-directional sound field, which is really interesting, but not everybody is doing it in that format. Some people are doing it in basically like a 5.1 or 7.1 format, which you can do, but it doesn't give you the same playback. So, here at Sterling, we're kind of waiting to see where it really goes and how actually if mastering is going to be involved. Everything that's being done right now is basically back catalog stuff being converted to Atmos. Um, and it's great. Like I've been to some studios. I was out in LA a couple of weeks ago listening to some studios out there who are going heavy into it just to see like what it's about and kind of get their take on it. And it's really cool, but I think it's really early in the game to really know what's going to happen, and nobody's really done anything new. Nobody's started a project in Atmos
Yeah.
yet. So I mean, they're on the burners and they're slated to be done, but it's going to be really interesting to see the way they come out. It's going to be like it's changing the sound field. Basically, we all listen to is in stereo, and this is changing it to immersive. So the sound is around you and above you, and different angles and just different things. The music's going to hit you a different
I've
way.
been so surprised that what has been 50 years ago that we went to from mono to stereo, And then I've been,
Yeah.
and we've had 5.1 and obviously surround sound for a while. I've been surprised, to be honest, that we haven't mixed more in like the spatial immersive audio, and especially music. Because you go to a theater, and the planes that are flying above you, like they come from behind, they go. So it's like we've been doing that in movie theaters for 25 years, and it's actually been super.
So that's what Atmos has been in theaters
Yes,
for a
the
long
Dolby
time.
Atmos in theaters. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's really, I've been surprised that as creatives, we haven't, as creative artists, we haven't been like, oh, I want the guitar, the drums behind the guy. You know what I mean? Like, it just would create such a vibe. Obviously, the tech would have, maybe it's just that the tech hasn't caught up in little speakers like this compared to, things. But it's something I've been thinking about for a long time that just super interesting.
So that's kind of it, is that the playback, like in the theater, you hear that because the theater is set up in Dolby Atmos. It's full surround sound above, sideways, all that stuff. And home stereos and the way people are listening now, most people listen on headphones now. Like, it's over 50% of the way people listen to music is on headphones. I think it's like in the 80s, the 80 percentile. And they haven't had any technology yet to handle surround sound in a headphone because it's basically two speakers. So the Dolby Atmos system is kind of a phasing, if you will, setup where, phase changes the position of the sound, and it can be replicated somewhat in headphones now. Not the same as actually going to a theater or hearing a full system, but it's kind of like it's a binary kind of fake out system, a binaural system. So it's really interesting the way it's going forward. Like I have the Apple AirPod Maxes, which replay Atmos in headphones. And I'll be honest, it sounds great, but it does not sound the same as being in a theater and hearing that, because this, the bass isn't the same. And I mean, a lot of playback that you would hear in a theater, like, is all about the range of frequency in what's going on and the way the level can be like blasted. And it's just something that is really new, and I think it's going to change. Years ago when there were different formats, SACD, which was super high res, where people could listen back to exactly the same, frequency that we were recording at in studios here, and like real high res and great detail. But again, it didn't really take off because the playback of most people is not, like if you see these speakers here, these are like professionally tuned and expensive giant speakers, and the room is built for these speakers. The playback here is definitely more dramatic than you would hear at home. And that's kind of where Atmos is right now. Is like the technology is there, and the desire to do that is there, but it's being able, accessible for homes, for people at home or headphones or whatever. So it's got a little way to go before that. But even surround sound, when surround sound first came out, people were doing some mixes in surround sound, but it just didn't take off because not everybody had like Sonos was not really a thing 10 years ago when surround sound was out. Now almost everybody I know has a Sonos system or a Bose system or something Sony system. So now that it's more available and more people have it, you'll start seeing more stuff.
Absolutely. I feel like that is one of the biggest issues as a creative. We're always seeking this higher quality sound, and meanwhile the people that are listening to the music are listening to like iPhone speakers, right? The little eighth of an inch thing. Like it's like, so here you have a professionally tuned speaker in your studio that costs exorbitant amount of money, I bet. And then the average person is just going to listen to that, through Spotify, which is already compressed, and then through this little...
And on earbuds. Like, most people don't even use headphones anymore. They're using
earbuds. Buds are right through the iPhone speaker, you know what I mean? Which is even funnier. But I love it. I love all the techie stuff, man. It's so fascinating to me. But going back to the studios, like, so did you start Sterling Sound? Did you get involved with Sterling Sound? Like,
no, I got involved in Sterling Sound 21 years ago. I started working here, and before that, Sterling Sound was the most successful mastering studio in the world, and to this day it probably still is. So. As an engineer coming up in the industry, I worked at the Hit Factory, I worked at Frankfurt Wayne Mastering, I worked at some great studios, but Sterling Sound was always this pinnacle of a career. And when they asked me to come here, I jumped on it. You know, I jumped at the chance to be part of this
Sure.
team.
So
You know?
how do you think what defines Sterling Sound? You know, from all the others. Well, that there are some really great mastering company or like companies. How would you define it? Groups, mastering groups, studios.
Studios, you know, like there are a lot of individual mastering
Yeah.
engineers that are very successful, but Sterling Sound has always kind of been a group of engineers where we share information and technology, and we just like we have someone here to cover every
Yeah.
genre of music. I mean, basically we all do every genre of music, but you know, there are guys here like Joe Laporta maybe does more hip hop than other guys here. You know, myself and Randy Merrill might do more pop music. Ted Jensen might do more
Yeah.
metal music. Greg Calby does a lot more, you know,
Yeah.
indie music and things like that. So we all kind of have like a our own lane in the industry. But you know, the fact that you can come here and work with individual engineers in different genres is pretty cool.
Absolutely, and in the title of this video, and I'm posted on social media, the extensive list of artists that you've worked with. I'm curious, you know, how that comes about in the sense of like, I assume it's majority based on labels. Do the labels have contracts with Sterling, or how does that work? Because like, it's not like
They
I
hire.
assume it's not like Harry Styles is like, I want Sterling Sounds. You know, it's like I feel like it's just probably the label. This is here. It's going to go to Sterling Sounds, right? Or am I wrong?
Well, I've had artists contact me directly. Producers have a lot to do with the scheduling of it and the
Really? Okay.
booking. Mix engineers, like we work with certain mix engineers in the industry that know that we won't like mess up their mix, or they're comfortable working with us. So we have a lot of relationships with different people. I've had management book me. I've had just someone say, "Oh, go use that guy," or like it ranges. It really ranges. But I mean, a lot of labels like working with us because the capability of us to handle every
Hmm.
genre format that needs to be delivered, the way we can deliver it, the guarantees that we deliver it.
So that's
So
amazing, absolutely. And you mentioned messing up the mixing engineer's mix. I'd love to talk about that. So I'm curious. The one of the biggest things that artists love and talk about is like creating this massive sound, right? This huge wall of sound that every artist wants to create. Do you feel that that is majority created inside of the mix from the mixing engineer, or is that something that the mastering actually achieves, or is it a duality between the two?
it starts from the beginning and it goes all the way to the end. Like, I mean, from when an artist has an idea, he works with a producer and they record it and they get all the tracks together. Then they find a mixer who will bring that vision to fruition and like to light. And then it'll go to a mastering engineer who can complement that and adjust everything to really be balanced and kind of bring it out. I kind of consider what we do as like adding the goosebumps. Like we
I
take
love that.
that everything that's kind of like done and we kind of polish it, and it's almost like Photoshop for audio.
I love that.
Like we just make it pop a little more and hit the right way. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it
What's
when
the
I do.
typical turnaround
Yeah.
on a track? I send you a track today, and then how long does it typically take you to master it?
Well, working on a track, I mean, generally we spend about an hour on a track. Half an hour, is kind of, if you do an album, you kind of focus on like half an hour per track. I like to just play the track a bunch of times and really vibe to it and see how it speaks to me. And then when you're doing a whole album, like each individual track might have a different color, a different sound field, a different vibe. So as you work on it, you may go back and forth, like tweaking and like adjusting. And it's just something that like you're either into this or you're not. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like nitpicking on sound and like adjusting things. So it could, most albums take like a day to really work on. Like we'll work on it. A lot of times I'll go back the next day and listen to it again and just be like, maybe I need to do this, or like it could be weeks later they add one more song and then I'll be like, oh, the third song I have to
Yeah.
fix now. I'm actually doing that with an album right now. Is they just gave me some new tracks and I'm already going back to the stuff I've done already and retweaking that because as as it goes on, it's not when I started it had this vision and now I'm changing it to match the rest of the
Yeah,
music.
and the beauty of your job is you got to hear music way before it comes out. So,
Oh yeah. A lot of times when something comes out, like all of us here are kind of like, oh my God, I don't want to hear that track anymore, because we've been working on it for so many times, or there's been like, I've done a couple records in my life where there's been like at least 25 recalls
Oh
on
my
the mix.
gosh. Yeah.
So that means probably like 2 or 3 EQs for each song. So it's just something like, you never want to hear the
Oh, I
song
hear you.
again.
Absolutely.
Good. You're just completely played out on it.
I love that, man. That's so funny. So, I've seen photos of the studio that you work in on Sterling Sound's website and on your page on it, and even on your Instagram. You have some sweet gear, and a lot of it's, I mean, all of it's analog, right?
No, I have some analog gear, but over the years I've kind of gone from analog to just in a
That
box
was my follow up
because
question.
of the
Okay.
because of the volume of work that I do and the way, like, so back when everything was really analog, you would work on something and you'd have to ship somebody the ref, like mail it to them.
Hmm.
So it would take, a day or two for somebody to get it. They'd play it. They'd have to listen to it a couple times. They'd make notes. They'd get back to me and they'd reschedule like new mixes or changes in the mastering. And today, like somebody will send me a file in the morning. I'll work on it. I'll send it to them in a couple hours, and then they'll have notes for me in a couple hours. So a lot of times too, they want me to stop what I'm doing, go back, make a tweak, and then resend it. So I've worked on songs where I've made four, recalls
Yeah.
in a day on a song because of the ability of sending stuff, over
That's
server.
fascinating. So I guess my follow up question, which you've already answered, is like, what are your thoughts on analog versus digital? And the fact that you've moved over majority digital is actually speaks to that answer. That's fascinating, man.
So analog, I have a soft spot for analog because I came up
Sure.
in the analog world, pre-digital. And when the digital stuff first came out, it was horrible. Like it was just absolutely horrible. It distorted really easy. A lot of stuff you really couldn't hear the way you could hear it on an analog system. And it wasn't right. But everything has like a growing period. And now digital like has gone through like, a few decades of, refinement. And a lot of it too is, it's modeling at famous pieces of analog gear. So they're putting the stuff that's in the analog gear in a digital realm now. So it sounds just as good, or it's just like a new tool. Like, like in the beginning, animation was not that great. Like if you go back to like, you know, Bugs Bunny cartoons compared to like Pixar stuff now, it's night and day. Even if you watch The Simpsons from the beginning to now, like it's actually changed over time and it's better. It's better looking visually. And that's kind of the way audio equipment has gone. Is in the beginning it was kind of like it was what it was, and now it's more detailed, it's easier to use. You can get different sounds out of it much easier.
That is fascinating, actually. So what are you mixing in then, or mastering in? What program do you?
I use my DAW is called Sequoia.
Okay.
And basically here we either use Sequoia or Pyramix, and it's a personal preference thing. Just, a couple guys here use Pyramix, I use Sequoia. I just like Sequoia came out before Pyramix, so I was using it, and I didn't feel a need to switch to Pyramix, so I just continue using it, and the plugins that I use all work with it.
So
really
what kind
well.
of plugins are you using? What kind of brands, if you're able to talk on that?
Oh, sure. I mean, I use Isotope. I use all the stuff. Like, there's no secret in like what the popular stuff is. Fab Filter, Isotope. They're all there are a bunch of plugins too that like I've had for maybe I used it for 2 years and then I stopped using it, and then I had my IT guy just take it out of my computer. Things come and go. The UAD stuff is really good. It's really something that like I like the Isotope stuff and the Fab Filter stuff because I can use it every day, and there's nothing new to me where like as Isotope changed, from when it came out to Isotope 9 now, Ozone 9, like there's some things in 9 I don't like that I liked in 8. So some stuff I use 8. One of my assistants still uses Ozone 5 on some stuff. It's just funny when I see him doing something, some of his work, and I'm like, why are you using that? He's like, there's a sound to it. There's a usability to it that I really like. And it's just, it doesn't really matter. It's just like, can you use it every day, and does it work for you? And can you be creative with it? So like people always ask me, what's the best? And I'm like, There is no best. It's whatever you can use every day
Amen.
and be
You
creative.
are blowing my mind with that answer though, because the typical artist is like, "Oh, I need all this really expensive. I need an SSL outboard gear. You know, like it's all we need." And you're
Yeah,
talking about maybe a $200, $300. If you buy the whole package, maybe $1,000, $2,000. Like we're not talking about
sure.
like these crazy $50,000 gear. It's like gear that like is the fat filter. I think if you buy that alone, is like $200 maybe, right? You know,
Yeah, I mean, I was using something called a stealth limiter for a while. I don't even know if it might have been like $99 or something like
it,
that, you know, and
and
it
it's
was great.
super accessible to people. And you're working on these massive Grammy award winning tracks with things that people can probably either have already or can have in their studio without breaking the bank. And that's amazing. It's speaking to the accessibility. And so often artists think, oh, I gotta break the bank, I gotta go spend, the beginning artist that hasn't released this is my biggest frustration with artists. It's like I've seen it since I started. Is you have not released a single, like it's you haven't done anything, and you go spend $5,000 on your first acoustic song, thinking that, oh, I need to go to a really good studio, or $10,000, which for a starting artist is a ton of money. It's like I gotta go
Yeah.
do this, and then but like nobody's gonna hear it. That's what, like, or it blows my mind. Nobody's gonna hear it because you're just starting off. And I don't know. That's my biggest gripe with the music industry is we all think that we need this expensive gear, and you've
I
proven
think
that
a lot of
wrong.
I think a lot of people associate success with names of people who have been successful, and by putting yourself in that loop, you're automatically going to be successful, and it's absolutely not the way it works.
Yeah.
Like it starts from, if you're an artist, it starts from the song. If you don't have a hit song or a song that you really believe in, or a song that is so special, that like the way you sing it or the way you perform it, that makes it a hit, it doesn't matter who mixes it or who produces it or whatever. It has to be special from the gate. And, I wish more people would realize that. I mean, it's funny. One of my gripes right now is people send me work because I did this record, and they said,
Hmm.
I want that vibe. I want you to do that. For years, I'd mastered every Rihanna record, and for years, everybody said, I want that Rihanna sound. And I was like, that's her sound. You can't make that sound. You can't, because you come to me, I can't make it a number one hit. I can make it sound good, but it's not going to be a Rihanna hit because you went to the mixer and the master engineer. It has to do with what you're giving us. And if what you're giving us is not, a hit, it's not going to matter. It'll sound great, but it's not, the hit part has nothing to do with it.
Absolutely. And that speaks to the quality of, I mean, that's the beauty of the internet. You see these massive hits that some 15-year-old kid created in his bedroom that you can tell sounds like a bedroom mix, but it because of the way he performed it, she performed it, the way that it resonates with the culture at the moment, it's number one on Billboard, you know what I mean? And it totally speaks to that. Absolutely.
And yeah. And what's really funny is last week, Biz Markie, the rapper, passed away. And I remember working at the studio. I was an assistant at the studio where it was mastered, and I was like helping set up the session, and I put the reel up on the machine, and in the middle of the song they changed brands of tape. They had run out of like Ampex, and they used Bassif tape, and I could see that it was a different brand of tape in the splice, and I was like, that is insane. I've never seen that before. And it was the song Nobody Beats the Biz, which was like a global hit. And the fact that they just switched brands of tape, and it had nothing to do, like, it was technologically, it was horrible what they did. But because the song was actually a hit, it didn't matter.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
absolutely.
Like, that's what people
100%.
have to start like realizing, is like it starts from the beginning, not during the process. Like you can help something during the process and you can add things and make it better, but like it has to be from the beginning.
That is so true, man. I love that. That's such a great perspective. This is a great question, actually, from one of the subscribers that I'd love to segue to. So, being that you've worked with a tremendous amount of artists, it's actually a two-part question. So, you worked with a great list of artists, some really successful artists. Are there any artists that you have not worked with yet that you would love to work with? For the first part of the question. And typically, do you have you ever reached out to an artist saying, "Hey, I'd love to master this track or your next track or anything like that"?
Sure. So I'm the biggest Radiohead fan, and I've never worked with them. And if you're listening,
Hey, you know what? Hey, maybe.
but you know what I'm saying? Like, Bon Iver, Tame
Mm,
Impala, Radiohead, like those are all bands like I listen to. War on Drugs, like they, Tame Impala and War on Drugs works with Greg across the hallway, and when those guys are in, I'm just like, ooh, like I'm looking out my door, like, oh, maybe I'm gonna run to the kitchen while they're
oh,
in the
so
kitchen.
they typically come to
Like,
the studio for you.
oh yeah, they come to the studio.
Interesting. So artists
Yeah.
don't just send the tracks; they come to the studio and sit with you.
Oh yeah, no, we've had like, I mean,
Interesting.
you know, yeah, I can't say who was here last week, but some really big band was here last week. Um, you know what I'm saying? Like we've had like, I mean, Lady Gaga's been here, Adele's been here, um, the Rolling Stones have been
I
here,
find that fascinating,
Steven Tyler's
interesting.
been
Yeah,
here.
I assume that they would probably just send the masters and not travel with them because
No, it's no, people come in to
yeah,
vibe and like hear it in the studio and like say try this, try that, play this version, and they want to hear their
sure,
versions
yeah,
play together, create an album. Yeah, it's nice when people come in. It's cool,
absolutely,
it's great
yeah.
info. Um, now to your next question. So many years ago, this rapper came out with an EP, and I was like, man, I really like what this guy's doing. I was like, I'm gonna write to want to work on his album, and it was Drake. And I actually wrote to the label saying like, this kid is gonna be big. I really want to work with him. And I did the first two Drake albums off of writing an email to the label.
I love that, man.
So
That is
yeah,
wild. That's cool. Yeah, it's all about connections. Like every interview that I've had on this, in this channel, is everybody ends up being like connections, and you created the connection yourself. It's
yeah. I mean, you know what? Like too. Like I mean, first and foremost, I'm a music fan. Like I
sure.
love. You know what I'm saying? Like I still listen to music in my free time. Saturday mornings, I get up and I go for a long walk, and I put on New Music Friday, and I
Mm,
listen to
I
like
love
what's
that.
popping, what's new, and I listen to where the songs that I work on actually fall. EQ wise, level wise, like vibe wise. I want to make sure the work that I'm doing that's released on New Music Friday stands up to the other stuff on New Music Friday.
Absolutely. That's yeah, always improving. Absolutely. So speaking
Like that,
to what? Sorry.
you have to do that. You constantly have to check yourself. You can't like when you sit back and relax. That's the worst thing you can do in your career.
100%. Cockiness kills, man. 100%.
Absolutely.
So, being that you've worked on so many Grammy award winning or nominated and just massive hits, can you tell when a song comes on? You get sent a song from any artist. You're like, this is gonna be a hit, or is it still sometimes surprise you the way the music industry works?
So, a lot of times, like if I work with like a decent artist or like I just like somebody who's famous or whatever, and they bring me the single, I can say like right away, oh my god, this is going to be massive. This is just amazing, and like this is going to be big. But I mean, I've worked with people where I'm like, this is the worst record ever, and it goes to number one for like I can't tell you how long.
Uh-huh.
Like I can't always tell, but I think now at this point in my life, I have a pretty good barometer for what's going to be a hit.
Uh-huh. What do you typically see as a hit? Like, what are some of those tracks? Not specific tracks, but what are some of those features on a track?
It's just like lyrically, if like if all of a sudden I'm working and I get lost in the lyrics and I'm like finding myself like emotionally attached to what they're saying, like for me that's a dead giveaway. Like it could be anybody. Like I remember working on a Halsey record one time, and do I look like a Halsey fan? No, but like lyrically, this one record, this song Sorry just had me like, like I was like caught up in it, you
Mm-hmm.
know
That's
so
fascinating.
yeah, it's just like as a music fan, you still listen to this stuff, and if it hits you emotionally, that's like a good sign.
100%. And being that you've worked as your career has gone, I'm curious, how have you, if you have, dealt with the increased pressure of like, okay, I know I'm working on a Halsey track, I know this is going on the radio. Is there an increased level of pressure, that you feel because it's such a big artist, rather than something that might not be heard because it's some indie artist? And if so, how did you deal with that?
No, I mean, I always feel pressure working with like big artists because I want to make them happy. This is a service industry, and they're coming
Mm,
to me to do a service that there is no like there's no room for error. There's no like, oh, maybe I had a bad day. Like you really have to focus on what you're doing and try and give them the best record. And if I work with somebody, like a big mixer, like I'll just say Serban or Manny or Tony Maserati or Josh Goodwin, any of those guys, like I know the mix is going to be really good. And if I work with like somebody I've never heard of that's getting their first chance to work with a big artist, I'm worried about what they're going to tell me with feedback. And I've worked with big artists where the record just didn't sound good it had nothing to do with the mixer. It had to do with the production and the artist's new direction and things like that. And, you get worried that like, man, this isn't like what I was expecting, or, like it's not as good as I thought it was going to be. And I really need to like put something extra into this to get it to sound good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the pressure never goes away with me.
How do you manage it though? You just kind of push through it? Is there anything you tell yourself?
I mean, I've worked with Madonna a bunch of times and she's come in and it's like, it's Madonna, you know what I'm saying? Like there is no, like, you never get old, like there's artists that come in here and there's never a point where you're like, oh, whatever, so-and-so or whatever. It's like, they're big artists. They're like international artists that have sold millions and millions of records. And there are people standing outside in the street waiting for them to come outside. And you're kind of like, damn, like,
yeah.
Have
you ever sat and thought about like, you're just sitting in your recliner thinking about the fact that the tracks that you've worked on probably have been heard billions of times at this point between all the different hits you've had? You ever think about that number?
Yeah, I mean, right now, like I did Dua Lipa's last album, and like
of course,
it just keeps setting records on like and like stuff like that.
Every time I get in my wife's car, that song is on. Every time, like one of the songs from that album, typically the one with the baby on it, and it's it's like every time, like it's like so. I yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had somebody in here a couple weeks ago, and they're like, "Play me some music. Like, let me hear this, the setup." And I played Dua Lipa, and I was kind of like, "Damn, that really sounds good." I forgot how good, like it's been a while since I worked on the record, but all of a sudden I was like, "Damn, that's really good,"
Yeah, absolutely. So that's so funny, man. And that's the beauty of being an artist yourself. Like, sometimes you go back on some tracks you've worked on a long time ago. And I find that with my music myself too. I'm like, oh snap! Like this was good. I forgot how good. I'm proud of this. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And you just forget about it because like whether you get so caught up in the mix or you just start working on other things. It's like, yo, this is a bop, man. This is a bop.
Yeah, cool. It's kind of nice when you're like out somewhere and you hear a record that you worked on. And it's just like, everybody in the room is like, yeah.
It's good. I mean, and you work on so much though. You don't have to go too far. You can go to JCPenney's or a restaurant and you could hear any track that you worked on, man.
I was actually on the phone with a client today, and I was kind of talking him off a ledge about like level and things like that. And what was funny was about a month ago, I don't remember where I was, but I was in a store and I heard this song playing. And I Shazammed it and I was like, oh man, I did that song. And I was like, wow, I really like the way this song, like in the store, it sounded really good. And I was like, that's such a good song. And then I just told him that today and he was like, okay, that made me feel really good. And I was like, it's the truth though. Like it sounded really good, and it was playing on, at a ceiling speakers.
Yeah, man, that's so funny. I love that. It's wild. That's got to be such a cool feeling. So now that you've been in the industry, you said almost coming on 40 years, 30 something years, I think you said, and 21 years with Sterling. What is some advice that, two-part question again, what is some advice that you would love to tell your specific self, that if you were starting off, and what is some advice that you'd like to tell a newer artist starting off, whether it be in the industry in general or whether it be specific to mastering in your specific subset?
What would I tell myself? I mean, there were times during my career, I thought about getting out. There were some lows in my career work-wise, and like I made transitions from one studio to another, and I hadn't had a hit record in a while, and I thought about getting out. And I'm just glad I never got out. I'm glad I just stuck with it and I sucked it up, and I remained strong about my beliefs about what I could do and what I wanted to do. And I mean, I would have definitely told myself, stay with it. Like if it's your passion, live your passion, man. Don't like selling out or giving in. Like I tell young kids when they come in here, like no parent wants their kid to be in the music business. And I have 3 kids and I have one son in the music business. And You know, when he said he wanted to do it, when he was 12, he started playing guitar and he never put it down. And he's 23 now. And he plays every instrument. He's a producer, a mixer, an artist. He does all this stuff. And at no point during that did I ever tell him to think about something else. You know, I never told him to change his mind or try something else or, you know, look for a second job. And he's, you know, he lives in LA now. He's, you know, he's going through it. You know, there's high points and low points. And I just keep offering him advice, like to stay with it, you know, maybe go to another, try and get a job at another studio, look for new artists, look for new people to work with, just keep doing that, but don't give up because I believe in him as, you know, a mixer and a producer and an artist. You know, he's really good. And I'm not just saying that because he's my son, but I don't want to, like, I want him to believe in himself and to like follow through with his dream.
Absolutely. And it's so fascinating, man. I completely second what you're saying. I mean, obviously you have a ton more experience than I do, but I even on a smaller scale, I completely relate to what you're saying in the sense of like, there were plenty of times I wanted to, you know, give up my career, and like I didn't see any fruit or any real movement in my career, you know, I mean, I dropped out of college 7 years ago to do music full time, and like it was like 7 years of pretty much nothing. And you know, like I tell this story all the time from the day that I dropped out of college, and now I think about it, like, you know, one day the goal obviously is to win a Grammy kind of thing. And it's like, you know, that Grammy speech, I need to thank my wife more than anything else for sticking with me through all these crazy things. Cause it's like, of course I had the balls to do it, but like she didn't sign up for that. You know what I mean? Like,
no, at this point, I'd thank my ex-wife at this point for never backing out of like my beliefs and whatever back when we were married. But like, you know, like it's one of these things, like, it's so hard to like really get into this business and then to maintain it and do it. I've had friends that like still ask me when they see me, like, are you still doing the music thing? I'm like, the music thing? Like,
oh my gosh.
Still doing the music thing. Still doing it. Yeah. You know, and then like who you work with, like Dua Lipa. Really? Like they look at me like I'm not cool enough to work with Dua Lipa or, you know, Harry Styles or, you know, Lady Gaga. It's like, yeah, they actually hire me to do their, you know, like
people have no concept of the offensiveness that they put off when they say stuff.
I know.
It's so funny, man.
Here's something funny. The first time I was nominated for a Grammy, I told my parents and they're like, really? And I was like, yeah. You know, I was like, yeah, I have the #1 record in the world.
Oh my gosh.
You know, and they were like, oh, okay, whatever that means. You know, I was like,
oh my gosh. That's the worst too, when nobody has a concept of what you're actually like, the gravity of what you're talking about too. That's the worst too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I shrug all that stuff off now. Like I don't even.
Yeah,
care.
of course, that comes with time, absolutely. So being that you know, and I want to wrap this up because I know you're a busy guy. So first of all, I want to say thank you. But mentioning what you said, like, really fascinating thing is like you said about the pressure of, you know, going from hit to hit. You know, you said you had you have lulls where you don't create a hit, you know, or you don't work on a hit, and that is an interesting pressure that most people don't. You know, it's a luxurious pressure to have, but it is an added pressure that a lot of people have to experience, you know, especially artists, you know, in whatever industry, actually, mixing artists or actual, you know, performing artists or mastering. It's like you come off of this hit, and then like it's like trying to reproduce something that goes to a similar level is a scary task, you know.
So something funny about like what I do is like years ago, one of my business partners and I were like, let's like go global. Like, let's get into other markets. Let's go visit other countries. Let's, you know, go try and get projects from all over the world. And we had been doing a lot of work in Japan. And then we're kind of like, you know, China's kind of like open now. Let's go there. And I'd been to China a couple of years ago in Korea. And, you know, I work with BTS now and I do all this stuff. But when, you know, you go into these other markets, like for Korea, BTS, Twice, a couple other bands are like the pinnacle of, you know, K-pop. But a lot of work that I do day to day is like I work on Chinese music that nobody knows about or hears, and I have to put the same energy into it day after day, and nobody's ever going to hear of these records. So like I'll go through weeks of work that I'm working on stuff. It's never going to chart in the US. I'm not really going to get any, you know, big fame from it, but I'm working on it because it pays the bills. It keeps the lights on. Like it keeps my career going globally. You know, like, so I used to be worried about like just the work in the US, all the big famous US artists or British artists that like kind of give you the big recognition. And now, honestly, like, you know, there was a period where I did like a ton of Latin music, and I was really, you know, I was making a great living off of Latin music. And, you know, of the last maybe 5 years, I'm doing like a lot of Chinese and K-pop music. And I have no problem with it anymore. Like, I might not be known for like a Dua Lipa, like, you know, that level here, but I'm working every day, and I'm making, you know, a living off of doing this other stuff. So, you know, it's not always about like the big artist. It's about working every day and doing something you enjoy and paying the bills, you know?
Absolutely.
Like, so,
Absolutely, man. That's such a great
and
perspective.
I do so much indie work too. Like, people are like, do you work with indies? And I'm like, of course I work with indies. Why wouldn't I? You know, you never know. I have this big thing about indies is there's always going to be a new, you know, there's the next Justin Bieber or Dua Lipa or Lady Gaga, and you're not going to find them at a label all the time. They're going to be indie sometimes, and that's how you find them. And if you open your studio up to them or your work up to them, they'll appreciate that, and they'll stay with you for years, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Is it the same rate that you charge Dua Lipa that you charge an indie artist?
No, we obviously have an indie rate and everything, but, you know, when you become famous, then you pay the big rate. You know?
Hey, that's again a good problem to have.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, like there's so much great indie music out there too. Like, yeah. You know, there's a girl from Florida, Casey Conroy. She wrote this song that still to this day, like 6 months later, I still think it's one of the best songs I worked on this year.
Wow.
And she's just like, you know, she's got a couple songs. She's doing really well. It's really good. There's a girl from London that I've been working with, Sarah Proctor. She's another one. Like, she's just putting out these great songs, and, you know, they're both indies. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. The last question I have for you is, typically, the way that Sterling Sound and you know, the revenue comes in, is it through royalties or is it through upfront payment?
It's upfront payment. Yeah, it's just studio. Oh my God, if I got royalties. Yeah.
Is that so? That's just a typical...
yacht. There'd be a beach in the background.
Yeah, we'd be streaming from your yacht right now.
Lamborghinis in the background. Yeah, no, we work strictly. You know, it's a one-time payment, or you know, it's an hourly rate payment. Yeah, I mean,
is that industry standard?
Yeah, in mastering, it's not really like you're not really changing the course of the record that much. You know what I'm saying? Like, that it kind of ends. I mean, I know some mixers that get, you know, a point on a project because of their level of mixing, and there's definitely more creativity in mixing than mastering. But yeah, it's pretty much just like an hourly rate or a package rate or something like that.
That's fascinating.
If you work a lot, it adds up. So, you know.
Sure, I hear you, man. And as you add names to that list, that you can start charging the premium. So it's amazing, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. So thank you very much.
Great questions. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If you could just hang out 2 seconds, I just want to wrap this up. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really, appreciate you guys making it to the end. I want to say thank you to Chris and his taking the time out of his day. And if you guys want to check out the rest of the stuff on the channel, there's plenty of stuff, plenty of other great interviews. Definitely go check out Chris's extensive list of artists that he's worked with. You're going to be blown away. Your sock's going to be in another room from how not far they've been knocked off. And definitely go check out Sterling Sound and also Chris's Instagrams, with both of the link down below. If you want to check out my music, it's the best way to support the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day. God bless and peace